Hello, everybody. Welcome to UK CORRAL, the podcast that reviews every single superhero and/or any other comic written by UK writer. This is your co-host Mike Allen. As always, I'm joined by Adamantium.
Meow.
All right, and back from a mini vacation, Nice Man. Thanks for joining us, Nice Man.
Nicer than ever.
All right. Okay, so this is this pick was in the queue anyway, but this was hurried along by Nice Man. This was his suggestion, and this is Zenith. No, it's Zenith. Zenith, yes, Zenith, right? What is it?
I
Zenith,
thought it was
Zenith?
Zenith.
Zenith.
All right. I'll write that down.
Maybe Zenith for Americans. I don't know.
Maybe. Okay, so Zenith. So, Paul, why did you pick this one, other than the fact that it's Grant Morrison?
Number one reason, because it's Grant Morrison, so 80% likely to be good, entertaining, intelligent, intriguing, and on and on. Steve Yeowell has always been a very effective artist, and even though this is early Steve Yeowell, it's not like his art has changed a whole lot over the years. And I like the Morrison Yeowell team. I also got their miniseries Sebastian O when it came out.
Yep, I've got that too.
So, I can't really go wrong with it. Morrison Yeowell, late 80s, it's got to be good.
So, yeah, this is a comic that I've always had scattered issues and collections of, but I never had the whole thing. So this will definitely be the first time I read the whole thing. And I didn't realize that this was coming out at the same time Grant Morrison was already doing Arkham Asylum, Batman. Am I correct? That's amazing. I felt like I always assumed it was much earlier. But anyway, okay. So we're just going to jump into this.
Well,
so
actually, do you mind if we talk slightly about the history of this?
Sure, go ahead, Adam. Yep.
Okay, so there's not a ton of information. There are great interviews with Grant Morrison, but the key thing to take in mind with Zenith is the fact that this was an idea that Grant Morrison had going back to 1982. So this was percolating for a while, for a few years. The original iteration apparently was a bit more unpleasant, a little grimier, a little bit more of a traditional superhero narrative at the same time. And in a way, while this book can be seen as a comparison or even complementary to books like, say, Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns, it's also a bit of a reaction to it. And there's a great quote here that I think most people will be familiar with when Grant Morrison was referring to this book. They were comparing it to Dark Knight and Watchmen, and said in a quote, both books felt pompous in concept albumy to me as a young man in the 80s. And so he wanted to have something where there was kind of a deconstruction of the superhero myth, having a Gen X superhero, but without the sort of what they saw as pompousness coming from Alan Moore or from any of those contemporary comics of the time. Don't know if I quite agree with that assessment of Watchmen or even Dark Knight, but it's an interesting place to start off with as we observe Zenith.
Well, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this, but have either of you read the interview with Grant Morrison from around 1990 from Amazing Heroes?
Isn't it the one? I'm clutching here. Isn't it the one where it kind of generates some supposed feud between Grant Morrison and Alan Moore?
I'm not sure if this is what caused it, but on the cover, he's wearing a Vaseline's t-shirt that says, "Jesus wants me for a sunbeam."
Mm-hmm.
And that interview, I'm not kidding, it altered my brain. And up until that point, I think if I wouldn't have read that interview, my life would have taken a different turn, because Grant Morrison opened my eyes to, because don't get me wrong, I do love Watchmen, and I really like Dark Knight. But I think when you're that age, you can get into that phase where you start to think that the only good superhero, it's almost like the Zack Snyder route. Everything's got to be serious. Everything has to be pompous. Everything has to be violent. Everything has to be deranged. And by reading that Grant Morrison interview, the interview opened my eyes to a completely opposite way of looking at comics. exemplified in Animal Man, Doom Patrol, and this. Just an attitude. It's funny that they mentioned like what's it called? They called it a concept album because that's how I see Grant Morrison versus. And don't get me wrong, I love Alan Moore, but not so much versus Alan Moore, but what came out of Alan Moore, the pompousness, almost the prog rock vibe, and Grant Morrison's more of a punk.
The self-seriousness that would come out of
Yes.
a lot of these authors coming out after the fact. I do agree. It's kind of like comparing, I don't know, a Talking Heads records to a Genesis record in a way.
Right.
But, you know, we'll use those musical analogies maybe a little bit later on because there is going to be quite a bit of that in Zenith.
There is.
Right. Yeah.
There is. And I was just thinking exactly that earlier. Grant Morrison has a punk sensibility, and Alan Moore, if anything, has a prog rock sensibility. I think so.
Okay, so that being said, let's jump into this. So this first appeared in 2000 AD. It started in Prog 535. Okay, so help us out, Paul, before we jump into this Nice Man. What is Prog? Does that just mean number, issue? What does it mean exactly?
That's
Program?
Yeah.
Okay, mystery solved. Okay. I mean, it was just one of those little oddities that I never really inquired about or figured out. But anyway. Okay, so here we go. So now this is another question I have. Are these characters pre-existing? No.
No.
I thought it might have been a Miracle Man thing because some of the characters that I thought were original Miracle Man were actually like Big Ben, right? Those were actually older characters that he just repurposed. I didn't know. So these are original characters. So this is what's his name again? I can't remember. Help me out, Adam. Who are the two characters?
Oh, okay. So the one is, I believe the title for them is Masterman.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and then the other one I believe is titled Maximan,
Okay.
Yes.
which is a bit of an unfortunate name, but still.
Yeah, not Maxi Pad. Maxi.
Right. And it's interesting because I always think about, how this would play if it was adapted. This is like a prologue. This is, it is literally called Prologue Ground Zero. And so Zenith does not appear in the story, right? So this is like kind of setting the groundwork for the world that Zenith lives in, right? Okay, so how about I start it then, okay? So basically we're getting kind of a World War II film that's giving us exposition of, like we said, the world that this is taking place in. We see Maxi Man, who's the UK superhero, and he's fighting the German super soldier Masterman. And so we see Maxi Man taking bullets to the chest, just like Superman would do. We see I keep forgetting who's who. Masterman. Oh, this is confusing. So we see Masterman defeating No,
Maxi.
Maxi Man. Masterman defeating Maxi Man. Okay, come on. Grant Morrison should have thought of names that are a little bit different. This is hard to keep track of. The German defeats the British guy, okay? And he's down for the count. Then we cut away to are these Americans or are these British?
I don't know. Either way, they do.
Allied
I don't think that
soldiers. For sure. Yeah.
Dropping a bomb on them, which kills them, supposedly. Now you know what? Okay, I'm almost at the end. I'll save my comments because we're only 5 pages in, but it's almost over. And then we cut to Berlin, June 23rd, 1987. So we're cutting to the present. And we are introduced to two characters who walk in and find Masterman in a kind of, I guess you could say, cryogenic chamber. And that is the cliffhanger of this issue. And my first thing before I say anything else is slight echoes of Miracle Man. Slight.
Yes, of course.
Which we'll be reviewing in a future episode for sure. But Nice Man, this was your suggestion. Why don't you tell us, what did you think of this first chapter?
It's all right. It just sets things up. There's so much I want to say, but I guess we're only 5 pages in, so I better save it.
Well, and we've reviewed stories like this in this format before. It's a little bit tricky, so we don't have to give full comments every time. But if there's anything sticks out of, any chapter, feel free to jump in. Adamantium, what did you have to say about this one, if anything?
It's very bold in the sense where you're starting off a serial that is going to be essentially a Gen X superhero, one that is in a band, one that's young and brash, and you set it so far in the past without Zenith, the title character, even in it. That's a very bold move, I think, for Morrison, and you will. It's just incredible to see that happen. The art is incredible. I mean, there's nothing to take away from that. Me and Mike mentioned in the previous episode with the same artist how incredible they are. The compositions are just staggeringly beautiful. I will agree with something, and this is going to be, I don't know if it's a critique, but definitely an observation to make throughout the course of this first phase of Zenith, which is the massive influence of Miracle Man throughout it. I mean, you have the time-displaced heroes, you have the generational legacy of this past kind of more innocent idea of superheroism being introduced into the modern era. You have superheroes as celebrities or messianic figures, which definitely echoes what's going to happen not only in Miracle Man, but Watchmen as well. And then you'll have some elements that neither book quite touched upon, which is a bit surprising. I wasn't expecting all the Lovecraftian elements in here that we received, but it's a very strong and very bold introduction. And again, the boldness of picking up an issue, having this 5-page preface, this prologue, and not having any clue where this would end up going. I think that's actually quite incredible.
I want to make one comment. While I do think the art in this is really good, I do think Steve Yeowell's art and New Adventures of Hitler is better. And I'm not sure if it's just the inking style or what it is, but I definitely prefer the art in the Hitler book.
Well, I think in that, because of the use of color and the patterns that we saw utilized in that, it created a very different tone. I mean, this one has to use stark inks and it has to use a high contrasting with just the black and white imagery. So I don't know. I would definitely prefer the artistic style of the latter book we were mentioning, but for this one, it's done very effective. And I think just even on the page that you have highlighted with the way the tank is being overturned by Maximan and the way that he's deflecting those bullets, in an inferior artist, that would just be a cliched written image, but it's the angle of the shot being taken. It's the sort of dynamic, the kineticness of that tank being overturned. There's a feeling of weight to it that you don't get for lesser artists. Even this, even though it's not my preferred manifestation of the artist's work, still very strong.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even if you look at this page, we get a nice image split up between 3 panels. That's always a nice little effect. There's a nice use of blacks. The storytelling is great. Yeah, nothing wrong with this art. I just prefer the inking and the colors of the Adolf Hitler book. But anyway,
mention
go ahead.
One thing. Let's say,
sure.
Oh, that's the second Grant Morrison book we've been reading that has a lot of Nazis in it, surprisingly.
That's true. That's true. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's also unusual to do 2 books in a row by the same author. But whatever. Hey, it's Grant Morrison. Okay, so now we're going to jump to 2000 AD, number 536. And Adamantium, you're going to cover this one.
Okay, so this one is really getting to the meat of the story. It's a contemporary setting, contemporary being 1987, and we're actually introduced to Zenith, who is, as mentioned, this Gen X superhero. And in this universe, it is Watchmen adjacent in the sense where superheroes are celebrities. For the most part, they're retired celebrities or people that have kind of gone on under the radar, but for those who are within the public focus, they are a figure like Zenith, who is a pop star. I guess they're kind of equivalent to like a David Bowie in a way, as the best analogy I can come up with. And our introduction to Zenith is not some great, opulent introduction with him fighting crime. No, he's tanked. He is like blitzed and just crashes through the ceiling, going into the office of his manager because he is completely drunk. So it's giving you this idea that he's not necessarily a responsible superhero. He's dabbling in excess, like a rock star, which already is showing a little bit of a difference between the depictions of traditional superheroism and what's depicted in this book. There is a sense of humor about it, though, where it isn't kind of the woe-begotten deconstruction we get from Moore and Watchmen as an example, but something that's kind of taking a rib a little bit for this concept. Anyway, we get some dialogue between Zenith and his manager, where they're just talking about various promotions they could be doing. The manager is talking to somebody to get Zenith a concert or some sort of promotional gig, and in the meanwhile, Zenith has gone to take a shower because, like I said, he's pissed, so he needs to go sober up a little bit. And there's some seeds planted for what is going to be conceits for future stories, including the fact that Zenith's powers are on a sort of recharging, I guess you could say, necessity. So he doesn't have permanent powers. This is something that could end up being a plot point in future endeavors, which it will be. But anyway, we get this great introduction of this brash, somewhat egotistic figure, and the issue nears the end with him actually just taking, I think it's going to be a beer. He's just saying, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm practically invulnerable to damage. What can possibly go wrong?" And then the issue ends and we're left on a cliffhanger. So, two interesting prologues. One setting up the universe in the previous issue. This one setting up who Zenith is, what his character is. No action. No real plot points in terms of story progression, but just an introduction of who is this person, what is he in this universe, and what is the concept of a superhero in this world.
And I guess so you could say that what the cool thing is the first book was similar to the vibe of Miracle Man, but now you're dropping a completely different type of character into that, I guess, subgenre, whatever you want to say, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, and this is the Grant Morrison version of a superhero. And I believe Grant Morrison invented the jacket because Animal Man has a jacket, the new X-Men have jackets. Who else? The Doom Patrol all have jackets, right? Did anyone have any superhero have a jacket before this?
You're right, jackets were not invented before Grant Morrison.
1987. Never. So yeah, mark my words. Anyway, yeah, I thought this was great. And again, the key is the contrast because they're so disconnected. That's, I think, what creates the interest, right? Is the two chapters are so different. I think that's what makes them interesting. Paul, what do you think?
It's all very, very good. When I read it, my thoughts got scattered. I ended up thinking, if Steve Ditko had read it, what would he have said? Because, our protagonist is introduced, through the skylight or whatever, as you said, drunk. And just, it's a great introduction, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It really is a great introduction. It's definitely of its time. You see how this is like at least 10 years after punk came along, and punk influence I don't think has ever really died. And also, so we have the haircut. By this point, there's no hair over the ear, covering the ears. Of course not, I think thanks to the punk, we got back to having hair cut over the ears instead of covering the ears. You see his jacket, that was so typical in the 80s. The shoulder pads, right? Mm-hmm. You see the shoulder pads. Mm-hmm. He's a very superficial party guy. He gets getting carried away with his life, with his celebrity. He just happens to have, as Professor X would say, an extra ability. So great contrast with the Second World War years introduction, and it's just, this is my kind of comic book, if you know what I mean, and you may not, but it's my kind of comic book. And beyond that, also, I have to say, since right now we're looking at the cover, this is a kids' weekly comic, right? 2000 AD. This is not the monthly Derskin-produced Warrior where Miracle Man appeared and V for Vendetta. This is the extra cheap toilet paper, weekly, 28 hence 2000 AD, Prog 536. And look what we have. Is this really a comic book for kids? In Britain, yes. In the United States, no. In the mid-70s, when Chris Claremont and Herb Trimpe created Captain Britain, it was the usual conventional hack work, painting by numbers, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is great for kids. If you were 10 years old reading this, isn't this great? Right?
I actually agree though. And that's one of the things Grant Morrison covered in that interview is that kids, like the stuff that kids were reading at this time in the 80s, they called it sanitized rubbish. And we've talked about this. I love Bronze Age comics too, but there is kind of a almost I hate to say it, but almost a fan fiction vibe to a lot of them. They're kind of just regurgitating kind of a second and third rate Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko type vibe, and without any real new ideas most of the time. And I do enjoy some of them, but there's nothing compared to this.
No, because to generalize and stereotype Americans, American entertainment, it's always so safe. Always within very, very narrow parameters about what can be done and what cannot be done. And it becomes, for me, painting by numbers. And then you have a more British sensibility. And in Grant Morrison's case, like we said, a punk sensibility. And he comes along and nobody's constraining him, telling him he can't do this, he can't do that. He's doing what he wants to do. He's not dumbing down anything. And so Zenith feels alive. This character feels alive. He's not just some, one-dimensional animation as the Chris Claremont, Herb Trimpe Captain Britain was. So nice, so safe. No. This is entertainment for kids. This stimulates kids' creativity and sense of art and a sense of what can be done. And yet it's not earth-shattering, really. It's very good. It's not like the greatest thing ever, but what a difference it is, from all the painting by numbers. Can you imagine in a Marvel comic in the Bronze Age even, and somebody said, Roy Thomas said to somebody, okay, what's going on in the first issue of your new series? Well, the protagonist comes crashing through like a skylight or whatever. He's completely drunk, Right, he's been out partying all night and he's completely drunk. Well, that's not the kind of message we want to send to our readers, is it? A protagonist whose introduction, he's been out partying and he's drunk. There's all this kind of moralizing and judgmental stuff. Instead of just present a character and let us be the judge of it, rather than you have to do all the moralizing for us.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
I also think it's interesting because we talk about the punk influence. Like, I would argue more of a post-punk element where you have this deconstruction, but it's meant to build up to something more. And that sensibility comes with being very, I guess you could say, critical over the nostalgifying of the past. You're not looking at it through this golden lens. And I think the sharp contrast sets up the themes or what are going to occur throughout the rest of Zenith. I think more so in later volumes, but in this first one, we already see a contrast between the sort of, I guess you could say, idealization of the superhero. You have everything you could think of for what a golden age hero is. You have the nationalist representing hero fighting the transparently evil force of the Nazi. I mean, you can't get much more aspirational than that, to this where you have a hero who sacrificed himself fighting this evil force to one who's just reveling in excess, whose powers are just a means to an end to get liquor, to get money, to get fame. And I think this contrast of what I will consider to be two prologues, because I think these are both prologues in their own way to the rest of the story, go a long way of also deconstructing the mythologies that happened of the past. I think here implicitly we're seeing a difference between the golden age of comics and what is coming out now. We're going to see a lot of that post-punk evaluation of the halcyon days of the 50s and 60s throughout the rest of this book, and that deconstruction of how glorious were they and how much hypocrisy is happening now, especially as it becomes very critical of yuppie culture. But that's going to be something we see coming up in a few issues.
Okay, with that, we've got a lot of issues to cover, so let's jump to the next one. No cover for this one, but nice, man. Do you want to take a stab at summarizing this one quickly?
I really have read it, I promise you.
Okay, okay.
It's funny because I read it and I really enjoy reading it, and then suddenly I feel like, oh, like
No,
what the hell happened?
I'm with you 100%. I don't remember anything, but usually if I reread it, it comes back to me. But as I'm glancing at it, I barely remember it.
Well, there's some kind of ritual set up because I believe a master man is going to be able to come back if he can inhabit a body. And so they've got this poor doctor here, although I don't quite understand. Oh, I see, because when Master Man is able to, or the spirit of Master Man is able to inhabit the older man's body, he can rejuvenate it, because it's not exactly the kind of body that we're used to. When people steal other people's bodies, they're usually stealing some, like young, healthy, vibrant body, and say, oh, it's so good to feel young and strong again. So I can only think that he's able to rejuvenate it. And then we find out there's this kind of horror connection, really, as Adam, as you said, Lovecraftian. But I'm probably jumping ahead because they managed to link the Nazis to occult stuff, which I think is one of Grant Morrison's things. He likes to link the Nazis and Hitler to the occult. Wasn't there some historical record of Hitler having a little dabble in the occult? Or is this just...
Everything I know about Hitler I learned from All-Star Squadron, but I can concur that is true. Yes.
That's what a great essay, what a great book title. Everything I learned about Hitler, I learned from All-Star Squadron. Special foreword by Roy Thomas.
Yeah, there you go. But no, I believe that is true. There is some truth to that, as far as I know. Yes, because that was, and to make another pop culture reference, the occult interest by Hitler was also mentioned in Raiders of the Lost Ark, so it must be true, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The Nazis.
That great documentarian George Lucas. That's right. Yeah.
Right.
So this spiritual essence is coming, and it's inhabiting the doctor's body because, as the woman says, it needs a sacrifice. It's inside me. The pressure. And then it seems to like splatter him. Is that right? Because it was just the essence. Oh, I see. It was just the essence of the doctor that has to fill the body of Master Man. They don't need the doctor's body. They just obliterate it. Am I correct in that?
I believe so, yes.
Pretty much. So he essentially explodes like an overinflated balloon. And then the presence, this Cthulhian Lovecraftian entity, then enters back into Master Man.
Yes.
And then we get to the last page. Yeah.
Well, that's it. The spirit of Master Man is back in Master Man's body. He's revived. He's all ready to go again, and he is actually. Not just some simple Nazi. He is from another, his essence is from another dimension, from 20,000 years ago, Eok Sot Ot, Eater of Souls. So really, it's Nazi plus, isn't it?
Right.
And he wants to go to London. He wants to have a visit to London. And he has a photo in hand, very conveniently, of Zenith. So his focus is Zenith, but we don't know why.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Nice chapter. It's very blatantly Lovecraftian, which I think is great. So yeah, I don't know, just another great chapter, an interesting way to bring back this character, and also, as with Miracle Man, they kind of need a scientific explanation to explain the jump, because in Miracle Man, was it 60s to 80s, I think, and this is 40s to 80s, right? I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, Miracle Man's 50s.
50s to 80s. Okay. But yeah, just interesting. Just very cool. What do you think, Adamantium?
It's an interesting concept. I was not anticipating a Lovecraftian element entering into here.
Right.
It works for the purposes of the story. Because these chapters are so abrupt, I'm going to save more thorough thoughts for a little bit later on. But, you know, impeccable art, interesting concepts. But, yeah, I don't want to say too much more until we get to some subsequent progs.
The monster looks great. And the page that I'm on right now, these pages are great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we can jump to the next one. I can take over. So now we're in 1987 still, and we are with who is this again? I don't remember.
Character?
Yeah.
She's a super duper from.
Oh yes, that's right. Okay, that's right. That's
World
right.
War II.
It's all coming back to me. So yes, so we're being introduced to various former superheroes and kind of what they're doing right now in the present day. As she's going about her day, she is interrupted by Masterman. Not, what's the other guy's name?
Maxie.
Not Maxie Man, Masterman. Masterman smashes through the door and identifies her as Ruby Fox. 20 years ago, you called yourself Voltage and you could manipulate electrical fields. So he's trying to get her going, and she is trying to think of how to stop him. She hasn't done it in a while, which I love. Sorry, but I love stuff like this. So she's in her mind, she's reaching into the electrical supply. We see we see like a little bit of crackling around the wires, and she electrocutes him, and then now he's been hurt, so he punches her back. She's trying to run away. She ends up jumping out the window and then flying away at the end. And that's pretty much the whole story. But what's happened is that he's basically kind of activated her. She probably hasn't done anything super in 20 years. So again, a very, very cool concept, and something that's been probably done a lot more since this story. There's a little bit of Miracle Man, a little bit of Watchmen, but now I think we're getting into, because again, I've read this, but not really all the way through, but I think we see a lot of this type of thing in a lot of comics nowadays, kind of like getting the team back together, reactivating old superheroes. What do you think, Adam?
Well, if I may, I just want to talk a little bit about what I find so fascinating about this final page.
Sure.
And that is the burning of these albums from the 1960s. We see a record from the Doors, we see a record from the Beatles. This is a jump that could be a little bit incongruous, but it makes sense as the rest of the story is going on. We are not getting just a contrast from the 1940s golden age to contemporary dour 1980s. A lot of this comic is going to be talking about the passing of time from the halcyon 60s and what happened, and the exploration of what happened to this era of hope and social change to this age of cynicism we're in now. And we're getting this beautifully illustrated by these albums being lit on fire after this explosion in Voltage's apartment. And that's the character's name. Her superhero moniker is Voltage. Her name is Ruby Fox. What I find so interesting about this is, as I said, not to be a broken record, but irony, broken record, I feel Grant Morrison had a continuous theme at this point of their career, which was exploring the potential rise of the extreme right due to Thatcherism. And a question that arose for a lot of people, not only in the UK, but I know definitely over in North America with the rise of Reaganomics, was the idea of how do we end up in a state of this extreme cynicism on the far right bleeding towards fascism after these halcyon days of hope and wonder and the social movements of the 1960s. And really, there's this explanation of hypocrisy, people selling out, people giving up, and just giving back to excess. And what we have is this figure this literal Nazi destroying here the vestiges of this era of hope as he pursues through the 1980s. I think here the symbolism is pretty obvious, but it really strikes me that this is a story primarily about the death of the 1960s. And it's using the 1980s as that model to explore it. I think it's done very subtly. I don't think there's anything quite pompous about it, as Morrison was critical of some of Moore's writing, but I think it's done effectively enough to ask that question and to really say these sort of hippie ideas that we had of hope and a better future don't have a place in this world right now. And we're going to have a very, I think, bittersweet ending of this arc when we get to the conclusion for that reason.
Paul, what do you think? Any thoughts?
Nothing different from what Adam said, honestly. Really.
No, but yeah, that's a really good point, Adam. To be honest, even though it's staring me right in the face, I didn't put two and two together with her saying, "Far behind me now, my past is turning to smoke and cinders," and the fact that we're seeing the albums on the floor representing her past. I didn't even put it together, so that's a great observation. Yeah,
it was one of the things that I liked about that, all these references.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're gonna jump to number 4, and I think it's Adam's turn, right?
Yeah, I'll make this one pretty quick. We're still in the contemporary era, and we see Ruby finally meeting Zenith, and she's trying to convince him to join the fight against Masterman. And she's using her electricity powers to short circuit a music video shoot that he's in as a means to try to convince him to follow her to round up all these former superheroes to do battle with Masterman. And we get a little bit more explanation of exactly what's happening. I do want to make one slight correction. It wasn't the spirit of Masterman that was put back into the body of the literal body. This explains that the Nazis were occultist and that this Order of the Black Sun actually dealt with these sort of ancient ones, these Lovecraftian beings. And what had happened was they had this pact with these beings to resurrect them. And what she basically did was performed a ceremony to take the kind of metaphysical essence of this Lovecraftian entity and put it into a physical body. In this case, what better physical body than a superpowered supervillain? So that was kind of
thanks.
Yeah, that was kind of the crux of it. And it just explains that backstory, giving us some lore on exactly what this thing is, why it's a risk, and setting up what's going to be happening for the rest of the book, which is they're going to be pursuing these other superheroes to fight him. Now,
go ahead. I just wanted to ask a question of both of you to go back to something I said earlier. Is this too smart for 10-year-olds?
Maybe a 10-year-old, but not a 13-year-old, I don't think.
But it's very conceivable that many of 2000 AD readers were like 10, 11 years old, 10, 11, 12. Isn't this a good example of how there's no dumbing down at all?
Right. I agree 100%. Yeah. I mean, I first read Miracle Man when I was maybe 13, and it just blew my mind. I don't know. I think I think it always depends if someone's reading other stuff as well, right? Like it depends what that 10-year-old is consuming.
As a 10-year-old, I watched animated films meant for audiences that I don't want to say were dumbed down, but definitely were films that I think condescended their audience a little bit. And at 10 years old, I also watched 12 Angry Men. I think people who are drawn to something with a little bit more substance or challenge will do that. And I think the ultimate thing is the censor is the problem. Those that try to, as Paul, as Nice Man said, dumb things down for a potential audience. I think a 10-year-old could read this and just see cool-looking superheroes and punch-ups and get something from that. But someone who has an inclination to read a little bit further into it can get something more. And maybe, may I say, that 10-year-old who's reading this, maybe just for the superficial aspects, will start noticing the subtleties to it and be intrigued about the other things happening within this.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's always better for writers to write expecting their audience to rise up then have to dumb down. I mean, Steve Gerber, among the American writers, for me, didn't kind of flinch. He just expected people, okay, you're going to rise up, you're going to go with the flow of things. I loved that when I was a kid, reading Steve Gerber stuff, some Don McGregor stuff, Jim Starlin stuff. Made me think. I don't think you have to dumb down, which is why so many things produced were disappointing, because they did that. Like I said, the Chris Claremont, Herb Trimpe, Captain Britain. I mean, it's a fraction of the intelligence of the Alan Moore Captain Britain. I never enjoyed the dumbing down stuff. And, there was a kind of running joke at the time at Marvel Comics in the 70s, which they acknowledged, where in Marvel Team Up, the two heroes have to meet, fight, and then realize that they're not each other's enemy, and then go on to fight the real enemy. It was like the same setup every issue, and it's like this is just going through the motions.
And
Grant Morrison is not going through the motions. He's writing something he would enjoy reading, I think.
I'm currently reading those Marvel team-ups and by Len Wein and others, and they're almost unreadable. Well, they are unreadable. I'm forcing myself through them, but they're not good. Anyway.
Well, that I know we don't want to get away from this, but I have to say, too, when you consider some of those past, even Stan Lee, Jack Kirby stuff, some of them are just about unreadable. There's a Fantastic Four annual where they go into the negative zone and they meet Annihilus.
Yep.
Sounds so promising. It is absolutely moronic. It really is absolutely moronic.
Yeah. You're right. We could talk about that all night. I'll just say one thing. There are some people that sort of advocate for the Marvel style of creating comics. I don't think it works. Unless you're just creating action, fun, throwaway comics, yes, but there is no way you could create something like Zenith or Miracle Man doing that. No way.
It's creating a product, not creating anything more pointed than that.
Right.
I think you mean the Marvel method?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it works brilliantly at times. It so much depends on the artist,
Well, and the writer, because then the writer has to make it all kind of make sense after. But
yeah, it does. But I like the Archie Goodwin quote where he said it often gives rise to serendipity, and
sure.
I think so.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll definitely touch on that in a future episode. But we've got a lot of pages to cover, so we're gonna jump to. What's that?
We'll be here to midnight.
Yeah, I know. Okay, well, now we're going to talk about number 540, and I think it's your turn, Paul, right?
A wonderful cover, isn't it? It's so typically British. On the cover of like a superhero, whatever, publication, 2000 AD, featuring Judge Dredd. Is Judge Dredd on the cover blasting someone to smithereens? No, it's a middle-aged man with psychedelic, drugged-out glasses and a psychedelic outfit, and it's just beautiful colors. And I mean, just for the cover alone, from Flower Power to Corridors of Power. So it basically is the story of one of the super people from the 60s, Mandala, who was epitomized hippies in the 60s. And it's all far out and psychedelic and everything. And yet, here in the 80s, he has morphed into a politician, and not just any politician. He's a conservative politician, not just any conservative politician. He's in Margaret Thatcher's government. So it's like, wow, that's an interesting transition, isn't it? What happened? And like you were saying, Adam, about it's a bit of a commentary also, what's gone on from the idealism of the 60s. And here we are 20 years later in 87. My God, the idealism's gone down the toilet and been flushed a long time. because because even the prime hippie who used to hang out with the Maharishi and the Beatles and whatever else, he is now in a suit, and he is a conservative politician in Margaret Thatcher's government. So much for your idealism. And so here he is, and he's been approached by what's her name, Ruby
Fox.
Ruby Fox.
Yeah.
And because she knows that she needs to kind of recruit him for the upcoming struggle against Master Man, but he's apparently too far gone into the establishment, and so he basically tells her to get lost. But when he's alone and looking at the Times newspaper, you can already see that he knows he may not be able to turn his back on this development.
So yeah, another great chapter. Again, it's funny because I work I work with a lot of students. Like I do films with students, like younger people, and one of them had no idea. They couldn't pronounce yuppie. They didn't know what it was. So I had to explain what a yuppie was versus a hippie, and it's just a funny conversation. Yeah. So anyway, this is all lost history, but yeah, it was an interesting time, the 80s, wasn't it?
This reminds me a little bit of there was an issue of Hellblazer where there was basically a pair of yuppie demons that John Constantine was Constantine was investigating. I almost did the American pronunciation. My apologies.
Whoops.
And it was just such a great send up to have these like figures of like this post 60s hypocrisy, just reveling in the boom of, the excess of the 80s, be cast as literal demons. And, a lot of pointed commentary on that. I think it was Deagle who wrote that particular issue. But regardless, this is another trend I'm seeing beyond the criticisms of Thatcherism, the falls of hypocrisy for those who were all for social progress in the 1960s, now just being all for capital progress. It's great, but you can't say too much more beyond that because you're just getting a taste of who these characters are. It's not until the next prog where we're really going to get a little bit more meat of the story and where this is going to head.
Okay, so we can jump to the next one, right? Number 6, Patterns.
Yep.
So now we have Zenith talking with Ruby Fox, and oh yes, this is where okay, so they basically fly off, and then we cut over to Maxi Man.
Nope.
Masterman. Jesus, Masterman. Talking about his body, right, and talking about kind of like his past and what's happened. Can
we just step back one step though?
Yeah, sure.
Because with Ruby Whatsit, they know. You see, Zenith is learning a lot from Ruby. Like in the '60s, the main super guy was some Welsh guy. And the Red Dragon or something.
Oh, Red Dragon, yes.
Yeah, and so they have to go to Wales to look for him and recruit him.
Right.
Because he's the main guy. And so
right.
Zenith is getting pulled more and more into this. He's got the flashy garment and everything else. He does have ability. But he's really more interested in being a pop star and a party guy and a drunkard and so on. But bit by bit, he's being pulled more and more into this. And that's why they know they have to go off to Wales to look for the Red Dragon.
Right. And they end up finding him in a pub.
Of course.
And that's how the issue ends. But they basically walk in and are shocked to see this guy who was, I guess you could almost say, like the Superman of the 60s of this group, just getting pissed in this bar. And that's how we end.
You see, and isn't that great again? This is a great British comic. It really is. I can't think, again, of any American one, maybe there is, which would show this guy now as he is boozing away, just booze. I don't remember seeing any American super characters boozing away. Sometimes they're depressed and they're in the little dark room and just want to be left alone. But you don't see them in a pub surrounded by like beer bottles and cigarette butts and just.
Well, you know what's funny for me is the vibe I'm getting as this goes on is it's like closer to like The Authority or Ultimates by Mark Miller. So I think this is almost like a missing link in the evolution of superheroes, where that's the vibe I'm getting, is that I feel the influence is so prevalent today that maybe it came from here, right? What do you think, Adam?
I think it's part of a trend. You know, I don't want to say it's singular in that way, but let's face it, the zeitgeist at the time were trying to deconstruct superheroes and deconstruct the mythologies around them. So, of course, you had Watchmen, you had Dark Knight, you had Miracle Man preceding that a little bit. And I think it all worked in confluence working towards this. Definitely, I see the comparisons you're making. It seems like a much more, at the sake of sounding pompous, a literary kind of take on The Authority, perhaps. I think this is my first point where I'm having some misgivings about the narrative, though. And I guess it's just, if there's a Welshman anyone knows, or tangentially knows, who is it going to be? Dylan Thomas.
I don't know.
This is just Dylan Thomas as a superhero.
Okay.
It's like past his glory days, now a flabby drunkard in a bar. And I know the character Sidwell Rees even quotes Dylan Thomas at some points. I mean, it's a bit of a pastiche. It's okay for what it is. It's just also, I feel this verges towards also a stereotype of like a drunken Irishman who quotes Yeats or quotes Joyce. I just feel it's a little bit too tropey for me in a way.
It's funny because I did read a quote where Grant Morrison did say they didn't think the first phase was great. Like Zenith phase 1 was great. And I will say, because we just read The New Adventures of Hitler, that was like monumental. And since this is also being compared to Miracle Man is better than this. Animal Man's better than this. So. Yeah. And again, it's nothing against this. It's still better than, like Paul mentioned, all the American superhero comics that were coming out at the time. It's just that it's not right. And I love Chris Claremont, but come on, yeah. Much better than anything going on X-Men at the time. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Right? So yeah, not as good as Grant Morrison's best work, but better than just about everything else at the time.
As we get to the next issue, I will say one thing I do like, even though I felt, it's kind of cliche to have this drunken Welshman. It's very much just a pastiche of Dylan Thomas. What I do like is what happens after, which Zenith, this reluctant hero, goes about to sober up Sidwell Rees. He basically is just trying to get him to understand, no, you were the best hero. You were the emblem for us. And now look at you. You can't even make a piece of toast right. You're burning it, which is also funny because he has pyrokinetic powers. So there's a little bit of a play of him not being able to control fire. And it takes Zenith actually flying Sidwell up into the sky and dropping him for Sidwell to suddenly be able to reactivate his powers, to fly again, to be able to ignite psychopyro powers. It's a really great change of pace. Rather than just have this character as a flawed failure, we see a little bit of a redemption arc. And I also like, this is a little cheeky what's going to happen, because you start thinking, oh, Zenith is taking the fight seriously. He's really trying to make sure Sidwell can be up to snuff and be the Red Dragon again. And we see there's a little caveat to this going on in a few issues, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
So yeah, I thought this was really, really cool. That's all I can say about it. I loved it. Paul, what did you think?
Yeah, I think it would have been more of a cliche if he'd been Irish.
Sure.
Because it's the Irish who are renowned for the beer bottles, not so much the Welsh.
Sure.
And also, it's unusual to have a Welsh superhero. I mean, do we know of any other Welsh superheroes?
No, not at all.
And to have a scene in Swansea as well. I mean, there's not a lot of superhero comics particularly taking place within that region. There is something to be said about that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna jump to the next one, right? Enter the Dragon, Part 8, and I believe, Paul, it's your turn.
Well, Grant Morrison is intent on using cultural references, which I think if we could write like Grant Morrison and we were doing such series, I'm sure we would all do the same thing. So he puts in, musical references. Here's our kung fu reference, isn't it? Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And so Zenith has done his good deed for the day. He seems to have cured or is still curing. I almost said something I shouldn't say.
What?
Well, because Zenith has a very cheeky personality, so he calls him, like fatty and all this.
Oh,
kind of
sure.
stuff. So he's just about getting through to fatty, that curing him of his alcoholism, and so I mean Zenith, for all his superficiality with the drink and the glamour and the this and the that, we see he actually does have some qualities, right? Because underneath it all, he realizes the importance of this, and he's involved, and he has taken it upon himself to try for an instant cure of the Red Dragon. But the Red Dragon, of course, the alcoholism is going to not give up easily. So, he's got his secret stash, which is interesting. But then it goes on, I hope, until the Red Dragon finally gets over the alcoholic hump and pours his alcohol down the toilet. And then he's able to put on his helmet that was his trademark from the 60s, and he's ready for action. And as it says, next prog, walk tall. So this we know from having read ahead, this is further example of good writing, because in conventional hands, now the Red Dragon is all ready to go, and that's it. But it's not it, as we'll find out.
I like the detail of Zenith doing all this, like being clever enough to figure out a way to get Red Dragon to activate his powers. But then he's like, okay, well, anyway, I'm out of here. I got to go party. I love that little detail,
And with the comb in his hand to comb his hair.
Right. It's just a clever little, because I think, we talked about falling back on the tropes. If this was, no offense, if it was an American comic, he would also have overcome all of his personality flaws and learned, that he has to, save the day. But he's still, even though he's slowly changing, he's still kind of a dick, right? And I think they're showing that.
Right.
Which I love.
And, in Seinfeld, Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld agreed from the outset they were not going to have any episodes where they all learn something.
Right. No hugging, no learning. Right.
No hugging, no learning. Yeah. Quite right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's keep going here. We're going to jump. Did you want to say anything, Adam?
No, let's get going, because I think this next part is where we really get some intrigue into the story, and that little character arc I was talking about, a kind of anti-character arc for Zenith.
So, if I can remember what happens in this one, that's so important. We're with Masterman right now. Masterman has just killed. Oh, geez, yeah. Who did he? Oh, he kills.
The secretary.
Yes.
For Mandala's secretary.
Mm-hmm. Pretty horrific scene.
Kill. He deep fries.
Yeah. Again, maybe a little bit too heavy for an American 10-year-old, but no, it is pretty heavy, to be fair. I know when I saw stuff like that when I was a younger reader, it did shock me quite a bit when I saw stuff like that. But anyway, so he's kind of just like in his face telling him that he's going to take over the world. He's like, I have to destroy the world. We cut back over to Zenith and Ruby Fox, who are with, what's his name, Red Dragon. And they've all, like, Red Dragon has decided to join them, so he's walking off with them. and then they're flying along, and and then Ruby Fox goes back home, right? No,
Yes, by
does she?
train.
Yes, right. Yes, that's right. She decides to go home by train, and then while she's on the train, she gets attacked by what's his name, Masterman.
But you know why she can go home by train, right?
No.
Because before Margaret Thatcher came along, British Rail was nationalised, and the trains never ran on time, and they cost too much money, and nobody was ever working. They were always on sick leave or something. So now you see it's 1987, and the trains run on time.
Oh boy, that's smart. Interesting.
And there's a detail I want to point out, and I think it's very significant. Two details. One, it's a cliche for a villain to go up to one of our protagonists, pontificate, and then let them be to survive, to potentially foil their plans later. Masterman points out that he actually would need Mandela, that because of his psychic abilities, and that's the thing that we didn't really explain, Mandela has kind of a psychic-based set of powers. He needs to utilize him later, which is why he's going to make him survive. And he forces him very indignantly to tell him, "Thank you, dear Master Man," like really rubbing in that he's the superior, which Mandela reluctantly says he agrees to capitulate and says, "Thank you, dear Master Man." Then there's the subsequent scene I was talking about, which ties back to something in the second prog. Remember, Zenith's powers regenerate over time. He has these kind of ebbs and flows. He's actually about to lose power. And so Ruby Fox is calling him out on this. The only reason that you bothered trying to train Red Dragon and get him to be a superhero again is so you could avoid having a fight to save yourself. And yes, that's exactly what he was doing. So we see this sort of, I wouldn't say amorality. Yeah, let's call it that. Amorality about the character. He doesn't necessarily care about saving the world. He wants to save himself.
You see, Steve Ditko, as I said, he would be horrified. If he had read it, he'd have been horrified. Also, isn't it a nice touch that Zenith's powers are affected by his biorhythms? It's not just, these are his powers. It's that extra touch, extra intelligence. No, they go by biorhythms. So can we rely on him? No. I mean, we have to be lucky with the timing. Sorry, Adam. Please continue.
No, that's an excellent point, and I think it punctuates what I was saying. To me, this is very crucial because here it underscores Zenith's character. He's not a bastion of morality. He's an opportunist and someone who's looking to protect himself. Now, when push comes to shove, as we'll see at the end of this arc and later on, he will step up to defend what he feels he needs to defend. But there's always going to be that amount of a gray area with him, which I appreciate about this character.
Yeah, me
and
too.
Yeah, at the very end, that horrifying visage of Masterman just tearing open the train car, all those people scattering about as he's looming over Ruby, a horrifying image. Fantastic.
I must say, I do like when a superhero or a character does something and you assume it's for noble reasons, but then we find out it's not. I just love that.
Yeah.
I think I first noticed it in Watchmen when, what was his name? He had the noose around his neck.
Comedian?
No. You remember when Silk Spectre 1 is getting raped by the comedian? Hangman. When he comes in, I don't want to discuss Watchmen right now, but that's a great scene for many reasons. But anyway, we'll talk about that in another episode. Okay.
Look, you see it says next prog, Eve of Destruction. So another musical reference from the 60s.
Yes.
I don't get that one. Who is that?
Who sang that? So you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction?
Yes, I know it now. Yeah. Okay. I can't remember, but I know the song. Yep. Okay, so now Batman Returns reference, Burn Baby Burn.
Oh, disco reference.
I'm kidding.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And it's I believe it's Barry McGuire.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. For Eve of Destruction?
Yes.
I think so. But definitely Burn Baby Burn. Who did that? Burn Baby Burn, Disco Inferno. I forget, but you know, you
I don't
remember.
know. Yes, I definitely know the song. Okay, so now this is number 10. Whose turn is it now? I don't remember.
God knows. Let's
Uh,
just go.
Yeah, you know
Adam?
what? I'm just gonna go because this is basically very similar. You mentioned to Miracle Man. We got away from those comparisons, but this is like the big fight between Kid Miracle Man and Miracle Man. We're seeing destruction within London as Master Man is attacking Ruby Fox. We have Mandela looking on, but not quite involving himself. Just as it looks like Master Man is about to perform the death blow, Zenith and Red Dragon come in to stop and save Ruby. The thing is, though, even though they managed to temporarily waylay Master Man, it's not effective. And in this anticlimactic moment after this attempted character arc of redemption, Sidwell Ree's Red Dragon is incinerated by this optic blast of Master Man and is no more than a charred skeleton. And that's how that issue ends with Master Man holding up the skull saying, "Who's next?" as if he's Bill Goldberg.
So, isn't this great also?
Of
I mean,
course.
it's not good for Reese Sidwell, but yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we've gone through all this trouble to locate this Red Dragon, the great guy from the 60s. He's an alcoholic. He's way overweight. They've had to go through all the trouble of getting him to kick the alcohol habit, to finally get to the point where he's actually going to be able to do something. He's the main guy standing between Master Man and destruction, and bang, he's gone in 10 seconds.
It's great. I love it. The build up to such an anticlimax, and not an anticlimax, but such an unexpected. What's it called? What's the cliche they use now? Going against the audience's expectations. It's great. Okay, so
are you okay if I just run through the next issue as well, Mike?
Do
'Cause
it.
these are so short and
Do it.
punctuated.
Yep, do it.
Okay, another musical reference, of course, London's Burning, of course, with the Clash. And we do have a literal clash happening in here while we have the fight between Zenith and Master Man, featuring my favorite sound effect in this comic, fuck, as he knees Master Man right in the gut.
Thank goodness you pronounced that very well.
I know, Mike got to censor a lot less. Either way, it is a continuous big punch up, but a really well executed one. The dynamics of the illustrations are just incredible. As I said, it reminds me a little bit of Miracle Man versus Kid Miracle Man, one of the only really great fight scenes in comic history, according to my humble opinion. This follows through very closely. I love the dynamics they have where these characters are one-upping each other. And the thing I really appreciate about this fight is that we do get some character development for Zenith in a subtle way. Because Zenith is this spoiled Gen X kid who's been impervious with superpowers. Nothing has been denied to him. And for the first time, he's being bested by somebody in a fight. And you can see this sort of shock and this dawning realization of, I'm out of my league. I didn't realize this. And there's this great panel, actually, Mike has highlighted right now, where Master Man is clutching him by the lapel of his shirt, just explaining to him everything's fallen into place. He wanted Zenith here because the body he's inhabiting now is a temporal stopgap. The figures, these Cthulhian, Lovecraftian beings, are going to inhabit other entities, and that includes the body of Zenith. That's what they're planning on. And there's a true to the Nazi imagery, a sort of agenda of eugenics where they want to use these super-powered beings to create this master species to make physical forms for these Lovecraftian non-physical entities. It's actually a very engaging plot that up until this point wasn't fully detailed, but all the signposts are there up until now, and we really see the stakes. And with that said, just when we see, as if Zenith is about to meet his final fate, there behind him, finally stepping up to the plate, is Mandela. And that's how that particular issue ends.
Yeah, the Tory minister.
So yeah, and now jumping into the next issue because it's just a continuation. Now Mandela is fighting Maxi Man. And
Master Man.
Geez, Master Man. Yeah.
You can just call him the Nazi. That's all he is.
Yeah, the Nazi, yeah. Yeah, and of course, like you said, echoes of Miracle Man versus Kid Miracle Man. And they're going back and forth. And then Zenith steps up to the plate and actually puts his fist through Maxi Man. Master Man. And supposedly defeats him. We did it. We beat him. Why is everybody screaming? We only killed the host body. What? Oh, no. We only killed the host body. And then we get a splash page in color, which I believe, Nice Man, is because this was on the inside back cover, which would have had color, right?
I believe so.
I believe that's why. Yeah, I think. Because I have some UK comics, and they'll have like a story page on the inside cover and on the inside back cover. And then in the middle, they'll have like 4 pages that are color, just random. But anyway, so yeah, very nice little cliffhanger.
Some alien entities with bad teeth, right?
Yes, right. Okay, so now we'll jump to chapter or Prog 13. Paul, do you want to do this one?
Unfortunately, I cannot.
Oh, because you haven't read it. I forgot.
Right.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Well, you let the cat out of the bag with that one, Mike.
Yeah. Adam, do you want to do this one?
I will quickly go through. This is some of the most creative art that we're going to see. And I apologize. I think in the last episode, we were mispronouncing the artist's name. I think I may have said Yeowell. It's just Yeowell. Is that correct?
I think so, Steve Yeowell.
Yeowell, okay.
Yeah.
Yeowell's art is incredible. We're seeing basically this extra dimensional entity absorb both Mandela and Zenith into itself. And so we see this contortion of Zenith's body. He's being stretched out like a Looney Tunes cartoon. He's essentially being driven mad by dimensions and properties, moving in, shifting in ways that are impossible in his physical plane. And with that said, eventually, Mandela, thanks to his ability to manipulate psychic energy and his various powers, is able to ground Zenith a bit as they plan for their escape. They talk a little bit about the plans of these extra dimensional entities and how damaging it could be, but ultimately they're caught. This entity finds them in this anti-reality zone, and we see this row of alien teeth just about to descend upon our heroes. As it says, I'm hungry. I'm so very hungry. If you're okay, just because these are such truncated short issues, I'm just going to move on to the next one to recount as well, because they really are so close.
Did we enjoy Zenith puking?
Oh, that was fantastic.
It's a great little touch.
It was a nice touch, yeah, because I mean, it emphasizes how everything is topsy-turvy.
And also,
how disorienting it is, yeah.
And also, I must say, this idea of kind of being in like an extra dimension and referring back to our third dimension is something Grant Morrison would do in Animal Man, and I believe was it We Three maybe? But there's a lot of times where characters are referring to other characters in other dimensions, and this might be the first time they do it. I'm not sure. But anyway, let's jump to the next one, Adam.
Yeah, just because it is such a continuation.
Sure.
It picks up with the threat of that mouth. I was just saying it's going to consume Zenith and Mandela. Now, luckily, Zenith has been able to build up enough reserves of his power that he just punctures himself right through the mouth of this being inhabiting the fourth dimension. There's a little back and forth with some good dialogue exchanges between Mandela, Zenith, and the entity. But this is where Zenith's plan really comes into play, and you see that politician manifest. When Master Man was in his office earlier, he simply just didn't capitulate and say, yes, Master Man, thank you, Master Man, as a means to save his own skin. Because of his psychic powers, he embedded a psychic message into the mind of this entity, and all it would need is a code, a trigger to activate. And in order to do that, it would basically create a sort of psychic schism that would erase its mind. All he has to say is the following phrase, "Tiger, tiger." Very ironic considering that the conservative character using that phrase and its meaning of the poem it's from. But regardless, then we see this four-dimensional entity is just implode and be destroyed through this psychic suggestion left by Mandela. And we end the issue, I think, in its penultimate issue, actually, of this arc with them manifesting back in the third dimension, back on Earth, as Mandela straightens his tie, walks away saying, "Excuse me, gentlemen, I have work to do." And Zenith is there soaking up the press as he seemed to be the savior of the day.
And some time ago, there was a little insert in one panel, which, if you look closely at it, it said William Blake.
Yes.
It's
In
William
this
Blake.
issue?
No, some issues back. Because
Okay.
I remember thinking, I remember looking at it and thinking, what? Oh, it says William Blake. Of course, we have the Tiger Tiger from William Blake, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least I believe so.
It is, yes, correct.
Okay, so now we have the final epilogue, late results.
So there's a little joke implied here where he's on the phone with the Prime Minister, with Margaret Thatcher, saying, yes, things have gone according to plan. Zenith has gotten this publicity. And while people are saying it's great that I was able to save the day, I didn't really do it to save the day. I did it because it was going to be great publicity for this current administration. We're the ones that stopped this fourth dimensional entity from taking over. What a great way to gain votes from the constituency. So no, it was all political ploy. It wasn't because he's an altruistic character.
Mm-hmm.
He did it just really to fulfill his aim as this yuppie bureaucrat. Just as Zenith was trying to save his own skin. Really, the only character with any sort of moral standing is probably Ruby Fox, who departs from the funeral basically admitting that this part of her juncture with Zenith is over. She's going on a holiday, and that's it. Now, there's also been this running thread, which we haven't touched upon, that Zenith's parents themselves were superpowered beings.
Yes.
And there's also this thing that's happened where they imply and outright state many times superpowered beings cannot breed with one another. It's an impossibility. So Zenith is kind of an outlier, an aberration in that way. And that's going to become more of a pronounced story point for subsequent arcs. But for now, that's pretty much just left out there as a little bit of a tease for what's going on. And the issue finally ends with the woman who basically orchestrated this ceremony to summon this demon into the body of Masterman. It looks like she's hiding, kind of skulking from place to place, entering into a movie theater where she is greeted by a fellow member of the Black Sun, this organization, if you remember all the way back at the beginning of the arc, that was trying to basically create these sort of plans in motion for these Lovecraftian beings to inhabit the bodies of these superpowered entities to have a physical form in the world. And he says, because you failed, you know what your consequence is, and leaves a bomb with her that explodes inside of a movie theater, killing her as well as everyone else within that building. So after that, we get a little bit of a, I guess you could say, epilogue. We just see Zenith just hanging out with various celebrities. I see definitely Lemmy is one of them who I'm seeing. I think there's a few other notable people, but for the most part, it's just an interesting little splash page. And yeah, a great way to end this series. A deconstruction of what it means to be a superhero for the modern times, the superhero as celebrity, the superhero as the cynic, and the savior of the day, not necessarily being the good guy, but just the guy who did what he needed to do to either save his skin or make sure the prime minister gets enough votes.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
He's with Jonathan Ross and Patsy Kensit and Bob Monkhouse, who was a big celebrity in the 60s. And also had some, I don't know, some comeback stuff in the 80s. Yeah. And can you read all that writing? Clicking to the beat at the Limelight Club last night. You know, this is like a clip from a newspaper. Just think, they took the time and trouble to write all that.
Mm-hmm.
Now is someone actually going to read it all? Yeah.
It's funny because it starts off as a sort of tabloid-esque explanation of this in-universe and diverts over in a sort of meta-textual way to actually being Morrison himself talking about the book, thanking Steve Yeowell and other people who contributed. So it's a very ingenious thing to read if you make it all the way through this dense block of text.
Yeah.
So I give it my thoughts. Obviously, I've talked a lot. I don't think I need to say anything more. But Mike, I'm curious. This was a kind of an anticlimax because the heroes weren't really heroes in the end. The villain was, of course, defeated, but there's the promise of a potential return, and there's some unresolved story threads. With all this left hanging, what did you make of the ending of Zenith?
Yeah, it is a bit anticlimactic, especially when we're comparing it to Miracle Man and some other books. But this is only the first phase. There's 5 trade paperbacks we're going to read, right? So this is, as far as, it's not the ending of the story, but as far as how enticing it is to keep going, I think it's more the ideas themselves that are interesting. The actual plotting is fairly straightforward, I think, but it's definitely something I want to keep reading, and we're going to keep reading, but it's so far not among my favorites by Grant Morrison. Put it that way. But better than just about everything else that was coming out in 1987.
Are you sure? In 87, there was good stuff. Because DC had done the Crisis.
Okay.
Post Crisis.
Well, that was 86. But okay, other than Watchmen, maybe Daredevil by Frank Miller.
George Perez, Wonder Woman.
That was not nearly as good as this, though, I don't think. Sorry. I don't think so. The art was good, but...
the revitalized Flash.
Oh... I just tried to read the Mike Baron issues, couldn't get through them. Then I skipped to the Bill Loeb's issues. They're better, but not great. They're pretty good, but this is better.
And what else?
You're just going to keep listing everything.
Well, I just think, DC did a good job with the Crisis and the post.
Yeah, of course. We'll do a post-crisis podcast at some point, for sure.
Yeah. But I love that clip, the newspaper-like clip. It's like something from The Sun or something like this.
Right.
Mention of Halo Jones, Judge Dredd, Rojas and Hammerstein, and it's a nice. These are all nice touches. But good stuff. It's still good stuff.
Yeah. I'm going to break my promise. I guess I will talk a little bit more. If we're comparing this to other contemporary books. No, I don't think it has the same sort of punch or maybe even impact that something like Watchmen, Miracle Man, even something that Morrison would do a little bit later on with Animal Man would have.
Right.
And, as comparisons, I think the problem with me even making those, or us making those, is that Zenith will end up being a very different book than those. I think it starts out where you can see it being, I don't want to say derivative, but especially influenced by the likes of Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns. But where it ends up is going to be, yes, you could say adjacent to Miracle Man, but it really gains an identity the further the story goes, which I appreciate. It's not a perfect run, this opening arc. I actually agree with Morrison's own assessment that this is probably the weakest of the entire run on Zenith, but it's still incredible art. The character development, while not brilliant, it throws you for some loops, and it does catch you off guard from time to time. And again, I think there was a trend, especially in music and film, that was really looking at demystifying the 1960s, trying to say they weren't this halcyon age that we all need to fondly remember back on and pat ourselves on the back and think, weren't we great because of the 60s, racism ended and Civil War ended and intra-country tension ended. None of that stuff ended. It was waylaid a little bit and maybe some progressive elements were introduced, but it led to a lot of hypocrisy. It led to the yuppies. It led to a lot of foreign exchange that actually was very detrimental for countries economically and socially. And I think Zenith is going to focus more on that death knell of the 1960s as it progresses and as it goes on. And I'm going to be interested to see what you both have to say about that as we continue reading this run. But as it stands now, this is a really good, serious superhero story that doesn't take itself seriously. And I guess that's my final thought on it.
I agree with that.
You know, Zenith is a great name, right? We know what it means. It's, you know, the peak of something. But of course, it's wonderfully ironic because this character is no Zenith. You know, he's a rather superficial party guy who likes to drink and, you know, likes the publicity. So I find Zenith, the name, to be rather ironic. But great name for a character.
You know, the irony, too, is that while we think of Zenith as being the peak or the top, it actually refers to, mathematically, a point that's above a particular location. It doesn't necessarily mean the very top or pinnacle. That's kind of an idea that colloquially we've influenced to have on that word. So I think Morrison, being so clever, maybe picked that to be a very pointed name. Yeah, it's above something, but relative to what?
But just the sound of it is good, isn't it?
Right.
It is. It's as I think Mandela would say, it's great marketing.
I mean, it's a much better name than Captain Britain.
Also, yeah.
I mean,
great.
I prefer Captain Pugwash.
Okay, so here's the thing. We're going to be reviewing the entirety of Zenith. So we have 5 more books to go. And hopefully Paul will read them all before we review them, right?
Well, as long as I don't get called away through
all right.
sudden things.
All right, okay. But next week we're going to take a left turn because we have replaced Neil Gaiman in our lineup.
Thank God.
With another British writer named James Robinson. And so next week we're going to be reviewing The Golden Age.
James Robinson used to be in our group that used to meet once a month in London in the early 80s.
Really? Wow. Well, we'll talk about that next episode for sure. It's only 4, I mean, compared to this, it's going to be a quick one. There's only 4 issues, right? So.
Right.
But it'll be a fun one, definitely. So yeah, join us next week. Join us every week for UK CORRAL. All of our episodes are available at comicbooksyndicate.com or on YouTube. Until the next time, see you later.